Hello and welcome to another episode of Raising Excellence. We're here with Laurence Driggs, and he is going to be lending his face for face reading. So thank you very much for being here. I'm going to switch the camera to you and start face reading. 1 second. Let's see here.
Thanks for having me, Agnieszka.
Hey, welcome. Welcome. So, we're good. We're online. All right, let's see your face reading. So, when we look at the face, the first thing we look is overall face shape. So I see that your face is tall and oval on the bottom. Even though it's your beard, I still think it's oval on the bottom. And in the case of a beard, when you're rounding out your beard, that's actually affecting the face shape on the bottom. So you're rounding it out, so you're doing an oval shape, which is a softer approach to reality than a lot of men have, and even some men that you might know who have square bottoms, right? So that the square bottom suggests that somebody's very stubborn and unyielding in their ways. Versus when you have a more of a rounder bottom, you're easily flowing with the flow, but you're not easily like a pushover, more like going with the flow. You know what I mean? I do think that, like, looking at the shape of your face right now, I do think that maybe when you were a child, your chin was a little bit more triangular and you might have been more of a pushover when you were younger. But I think that's balanced out as you became more of a man. Is that true?
That's
But
probably a fair assessment.
I also see some rebellious nature in the hairline. Can you push your hair back and just so I can see the natural hairline? Okay. And lean forward a little bit to the camera if you could. There we go. Definitely rebellious hairline. Okay, can I see that? This is where your wrist is, the piece of the temple. Okay, there we go. I see. Okay, I see. All right, so definitely a rebellious hairline, but also a lot of high ideals. So you definitely play with a deck of cards that makes you focus on what's good for the world, what's good for the family, what's good for whatever your values are. So you really, it's important for you to live through your values, much more than some other head shape would. And that rebellious nature might kind of trip you up because you might find a lack of patience for some rules that seem arbitrary or make no sense to you as a person. And therefore, you may be tempted to not necessarily follow those rules because it makes no sense. So why would you have to follow it, right? And especially as everything that you do, you really like look through those high ideals of yours, those values that you have, that you think that are part of who you really are. And so your actions would be definitely governed by that. So one thing that I see that might trip you up a little bit in your quest for perfection, because you are on a quest for perfection, right? So hang on a second, I need to take a drink of water. Keep the suspense. Okay, so the one thing that I see is your temples. When you lifted your hairline and you showed me your temples, there was a definite V here, and then there were a little bit of like not bald spots, but lack of hair in the two parts up above. Then there's a bit of a dip in the middle of your forehead, and then there are little bits of triangles on each side. Can you show me that's the right side, the left side? No, the other side. Perfect. Okay, so they're pretty much the same on both sides. So that's interesting. Oh, can you show me your ears again? I'm just going to compare that to the ears. Okay, and the other side? Okay, and can I see the front? All right. So one thing that I do notice in the ear is that, and I may be wrong, but it seems like when you were a child, was a man or like a grandfather, whatever, who might have raised their voice at you, and you felt uncomfortable with that, and you had to be on the lookout for a male person who, because it's on your right side, what I'm seeing, right? And that's a masculine side. So that often, not always, but it often means that it was a man who really had this influence on you, where you felt like you had to be on guard a lot and watch out what's going to happen next. and really be careful what you said, what you thought. And then the other thing is with your ears, they're right in the middle of the emotional zone. So that means that when other people speak to you, you take it in through the heart. Like it really talks directly to you, right? And so for that, you would be a really good listener. If I was having trouble, if I was having a problem with somebody, I might go to you and talk to you, and you wouldn't be the person who would come up with a solution right away. You would give me the time to express my emotions, because your listening skills are on an emotional level. So with your ears and the temples, so it seems like both men and women, no, specific, maybe a male and a female, or some more than one, influenced you when you were younger in a very strong way. So that means, what I mean by that, I mean that they talked to you in a way that you thought was gospel, and you really brought it to heart, and you embodied it as if it was about you. It wasn't about you because obviously you didn't say it, so it couldn't have been about you. It had to be about them. Because if other people are talking to you, most of the time they're talking about themselves, not you. Like, when people say, you can't open a business, that's crazy. That means, I can't open the business. That's crazy. That doesn't mean, because they don't know anything about you. Even your parents and your grandparents don't really know they're not inside your head, right? And so because of that, people often say things that are well-meaning, like, a good boy should act like this. And if you were smart, you would do this. And you know what? You're always doing that. That is just so silly. You should not be doing that. That's stupid. Or, things like that. So you, as a young person, you heard some things like that. They weren't maybe positive. And now what happens is every time you're having a stressful time, or you're feeling like you're cornered, those recorded messages will play back in your head. And so the hair on the temples kind of indicates that you play back those recordings on a regular basis. So you get stressed out, and then a voice comes in your head that says you're a loser or whatever, but it's not your voice. So that's how you can tell. These are pre-recorded messages. Because sometimes it's your inner critic, right? Saying, oh, come on, Laurence, you're silly. You should have done better. You know what I mean? Or however you speak to yourself. But sometimes it's not your voice, it's somebody else's voice. So now, if it's somebody else's voice, the first thing you can recognize is that it's not about you. So don't sit and repeat the message to yourself 100 times. It had a big impact on you when you were a child or a young person, or younger than you are today, because it could be even somebody that really influenced you, like an ex-girlfriend or something, who said something really touching, not necessarily in a good way, but something that really struck you deeply. And then that voice is repeating in your head. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a person in authority. It just has to be a person who said a message that you really, really bought into with your whole heart. And it's not necessarily true. Probably it's not true. 90% of the time it's not true. Because 90% of the time those messages are negative, they're not empowering, and they don't create any positive change or make you feel good. They're just random criticisms that make no sense whatsoever. So watch out for that. So as you're going through your day, just disassociate yourself from that. You will have a tendency, and I had a lot more, like, see, now it's kind of more or less smooth. There are some hairs because I still do it a bit, but I used to have a lot more hair on my temples. And I used to play those games with myself. I used to repeat to myself the things that my dad said when I was a young girl, and that weren't positive about me at all. And I felt that that was the truth. It felt like the truth. Like when I was stressed out and having a really bad day, what my father said 30 years ago suddenly seemed like the truth. But my father doesn't know who I am or doesn't know anything about me, so it can't be the truth, right? You know what I mean? It's not my truth. Maybe his truth, but it's not my truth. Okay, so that's You're not getting audio on YouTube. That is interesting. Somebody's not getting audio on YouTube. All right, I'm not sure. What more can I do
on
about
YouTube?
this? Yeah, Matt just said he's not getting audio on YouTube. Matt, is this better? I'm just going to type that in. Oh, I can't even ask YouTube. Well, Matt, if you're listening, is this better? I don't know. Nobody else is saying. Nobody else is saying that they can't hear us. So, did your wife say that she could hear us?
Yeah, I can hear it in the next room.
All right, perfect. Awesome. That means that our audio is working, because if it's not working, that'd be crazy. All right. So we have the high ideals. We have the sticking with the past messages that's not really necessarily beneficial. We have the ear that tells us that somebody yelled at you as a child, probably a guy. But that's not really here or there. It's just an indication that you might have had a difficult chance in the... Okay. Somebody else said that they can hear. Awesome. Perfect. And so what else we have here? Well, I would say that the biggest, the greatest, the most noticeable feature of your face are your eyes. And so that's a really good thing, because that's the heart chakra. So that kind of goes with your high ideals, and it goes with your soft attitude to the world. Hey, can you touch the tip of your nose for me with your finger? And is it soft or is it kind of hard? Kind of hard. It's medium.
There's a little pointiness to it.
There's a bit of a pointiness to it.
Definitely not.
And so, can you show me a profile one more time? I want to see the shape of your nose here. Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, you really do lead with your ego, don't you? Okay. All right. Well, so that would mean, oh, and I just remembered the story you told me before. Well, but I'm not saying that because of that story. That would mean that sometimes you might be speaking sharper than you want to, or be meaner than you want to, because the tip of your nose is hard, but you're speaking from the heart. Right here tells me that you're speaking from the heart, but the tip of the nose is hard. So that means your words are sharper than you necessarily intend them sometimes, right? But you mean well. You mean well, because you're always like, you're not trying to judge people for feeling badly, because your ears are in the emotional zone. So you're comfortable with other people's emotions, a little bit in the mental zone, but mostly in the emotional, right? So they're just touching the mental zone. But and then your biggest strength is your heart, right? Your biggest strength is your heart. So what's the heart chakra? So let's unpack the heart chakra for a little bit. So the heart chakra is the middle chakra. That's the balance, the point of balance, right? And that's what we're all aiming for, is we're moving towards balance. So how can we be more balanced in our lifetime? How can we approach life with more balance? And when your heart chakra is the most prominent chakra on your face, that means you're not only seeking for a balance within, but it's your job to find the balance without, or teach the balance without, right? Because that's high ideals, living your values, heart chakra dominant. Are you a pearl? They always accuse me of being a pearl. Maybe you are. But maybe you're just here to change the world and make it a better place. And maybe you're just here to teach people. And it doesn't have to be millions of people. If you're taking a tiny action and that action has a huge impact on somebody, then that's enough. Like, it's not about judgment. It's not about saying I should be doing better these days. Because I feel like you're ego driven. Like, your nose is much farther than your determination, which is your chin, right? So that means that ego. So I would even say that if you stand up, and your wife can affirm this later, when you stand up and you try to stand up straight, you're actually leading with your head, because you're trying to mentally force yourself to do things the right way, to push yourself farther and faster than you really need to. But maybe what you need to do is step back and line your determination with your ego, right? Because leading with the ego sometimes can get you in trouble. It might give you men, especially with, dealing with other men, when dealing with leading with ego, that can cause conflict, right? Or strife, or even discomfort, like, oh, that guy really annoys me. I never say anything to him, but he really annoys me at work, and I hope that I don't punch him out one day. because it's that game of constantly pushing yourself, and then realizing that you're not catching up with yourself in a way. So working more on focus more on the determination, because your determination is a little bit withheld. you can't really focus less on the ego. It's who you are. But just understand that the ego wants to protect you, and it's sometimes very militant about protecting you. But in this day and age, that's not really necessary. So the ego protects you. Okay, so solar plexus, your nose is very leading when it passes when looking at your profile. You lead with your ego much more than with your determination. And so that means that you can be easily hurt if somebody attacks your ego, right? Because you're not standing strong with determination right behind the ego. You're kind of like gang ho, and determination is slightly behind you. So what can you do about that? What can we learn from that? Okay, first of all, if your ego or your reaction wants to do something, take a breath. That's first, like, right? Like I know if you check my hands, my ego is longer, or my judgment finger is longer than my ambition finger, and that means that if I'm at work and somebody tells me something I don't like, I'll tell them to screw off. But maybe not screw off. I'll tell them very eloquently and make them feel bad, and I'll still lose the job. So it's not a big deal. But but leading with your ego is not necessarily good for us as a person, right? Because the ego is just one aspect of you, but it's like your protector. It's the ego. Like people give ego a bad rap. It's like, oh, don't lead with your ego because that just means you're egoic and you think that you're better than we are. That's not true. Your ego is strong because you're ambitious, because you want to make a difference in the world, right? Your ego is so strong it's coming into your cheeks. You have ambitious cheeks, so that means you want to work, you want to do something, you want to change the world, you want to make it a better place. But it does not want you to move forward because it's there to protect you from change. Because you know what? Change is dangerous. And the ego knows it because over thousands of years of evolution, it's always known that when there's change, there's danger, and it has to protect you. And its sole job is to protect you. And your expression of who you are as a self also has to come through your ego, right? So if you think about the chakras in order, the sacral, the root chakra is at the bottom. So the basis of safety, security, and everything is at the bottom. Of course, that's the base, right? The next one, as you're coming up, is your sacral, your creativity, your sensuality, your sensitivity. And the next one up is your ego, your solar plexus, right? And then we get to the heart, the center of all working. So you have to get through all of that stuff. You have to get through the safety aspect and through the creative aspect, and then work with your ego to allow yourself to expression that you want in order to express yourself through the heart. And then once the idea or the project or the thought or the movement that you want to start is in your heart chakra, then it has 3 more chakras to go, right? But the one right after the heart is the throat. And that's who you communicate. That's your rhetoric, right? So the idea ends up in the heart. And you know what else is interesting? You can think about the chakras differently because the Hermetics, they actually think about differently. You don't think that it goes up linearly like that. They think what it does is a spiral. So an idea starts with the heart, goes to the sacral, and then goes through the ego, then goes through the safety base, root chakra. And then it goes through the throat and is expressed through the world. And I kind of like that, but either way, it has to go through all those other chakras before you can go and express it in the world. And you have 3 avenues of expression in your life. You have your 2 hands and you have your mouth. So you can express by doing, or you can express by speaking, right? And so when I look at your throat chakra, it's not at all damaged or held back, so you can speak. You're capable of speaking. When I look at your solar plexus, your sacral, your mouth is your sacral, and so I have 2 very well fleshed lips, right? You have, so that means your expression is not stifled. It's not withheld. What's withheld is the power of your heart, because if you look at this video later, or if you look in the mirror, you will see that your eyelids, both the upper and the lower, are a little bit swollen. And is that because you're not used to working days? Maybe. But I think it's deeper than that. So anytime we see swelling in the body, like the little, see how you have a little bit of swelling underneath the eye there. So anytime we see swelling, we know that has to do with emotions, right? So in your heart chakra, where the ideas, where your ideals and your ideas kind of birth, there is some emotion that's held back, and that's unexpressed, and that's undealt with. And that's why your eyes are a little bit swollen, both the top and the bottom. So maybe thinking about how you can express who you really are, maybe remembering who you were when you were 4 years old, maybe getting in touch with another young person under 4 years old to really express that in a way that will express your true essence. Right? Because apparently before we are 4, we know exactly what our true essence is, and we know who we are, and we know how we're here to change the world. But afterwards, with all the bombarding messages from everybody else who says, don't do this, and if you're a good boy to do this, and oh my God, aren't you silly? You don't even know how to do this. You know what I mean? All these things, we kind of forget who we really are. So as an adult, it's our job, it's our responsibility to remember who we really are. Right? And to let go of that emotion that's stored in the heart chakra. It's being held back so tightly.
Wow.
I'm sorry, am I making you cry?
No, no. It's a lot to take in. Look forward to watching this again, but a lot of this resonates. It definitely makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if you can tell them. I don't know if they are puffy underneath, but my eyes are very sunken. They're sort of like
Puffy.
Almost looks like a black eye most times underneath.
You know, interesting observation. I've had that before for myself, and it was an allergy. So I was eating something that I was allergic to, and I had continually dark circles from the time I was a child. And they're gone away now. Mostly. I think they're still there. But that indicates digestive issues. But there is a swelling. There is an emotional layer to it too. And if your eyes are dark underneath the eyeball, psychosomatically, that would still mean unexpressed energy, held back energy in the heart chakra, inability to process or to express what's going on in the heart. So that would be true for both you and I, right? Not living to our full potential, not expressing ourselves in a way that we need to express ourselves, that our bodies require us to express ourselves.
And that part in particular, I think, resonates a great deal. And I'm hopeful that getting back to making music will help me in that regard.
It's all good.
And lighting technician.
You had to do it. It's all good.
So, yeah, I've felt a calling to get back to music, and make something, make noise, make sound. Hopefully, make something better than that. It's always been felt like a struggle to write songs. So when I got into producing on the laptop, electronic music, that was, I guess, a safer way to just make noise, make sounds, play with sounds.
So was it a struggle to write songs because the voices in your head were complaining, or was it a struggle to write songs because you didn't have the physical tools to do it?
I had the physical tools. I think I probably didn't give it enough effort. Didn't put a work ethic into it. I've really come to appreciate how much you have to work to get creativity. And
Don't let the lighting technician distract you.
All right. Um,
So that smile
yeah.
also
So
shows me a dimple on that side. So that's like hearkening to your inner child. That's nice.
yeah, I definitely have some dimples. Uh, um, what was I saying? Um,
You were saying about how it was challenging to produce music because you fell victim to something.
um, well, I guess when I to differentiate between writing songs and producing music, I grew up playing violin and then piano and then guitar and learning to sing and play guitar. So I could learn other people's songs. I'd have trouble remembering lyrics. Um, there are very few songs that I like really embodied that I could just crank out without thinking about it. But then when I got into producing music, more electronic music, um, there wasn't much of a vocal. There was a few times where I messed around with vocal samples, but it was just sort of instrumental and focusing on the aesthetic of the sounds, and that's something I enjoy. But you know, I'd like to. I think I have it within me to express something meaningful with words, um, and to do something very intentional and put the effort in and come out with some stuff. Um, so I think I'm better equipped to try and do that, or not try, but to you know put in the work and just do it.
Have you ever considered
Um,
that your high ideals are distracting you from the aspect of play?
sure, I'm and I do have that high ideal side, but I also, like you talked about the rebellious nature. I lived a lot of years sort of throwing out the ideals and being rebellious and just not very conscious, living at a pretty low conscious level, and um, so I suppose those are opposing forces within me. Um,
So let's talk for a second about those bald spots. We don't know bald spots, but the little there's an M shape to your forehead, right? So that M shape, what happens is it often happens for people who have a lot of thoughts, ideas, and they think, oh, I should do this and oh, I should do that, but they don't actually go through with it, and so it ends up being an internal battle. Oh, I should do it. Oh, I shouldn't do it. Oh, I should do it. No, who do you think you are? You're not going to be able to do that. All of this. And so the voices in your head get involved, and then your inner critic gets involved, and then there's an all-out war inside your own head. So that's what that indicates. The not because essentially what we need to remember is that whatever we do in life is just play. There's really no such thing as work. It's all play. And so, as you're playing around with music, and as you're playing around with words, and as you're playing around with expression, you can play anything. But if you create this expectation that your next piece of music is going to win you millions of dollars and millions of followers, and then you put all this pressure on yourself, that can really force you into a paralysis where you don't do anything because you have all these experience or all these expectations, and then there's a part of you that thinks that you'll never meet those expectations, so why even get off the couch? I might as well sit and watch TV. And I'm speaking from experience as well, because I destroyed more paintings than I actually kept through my younger years, right? So it's like, but it's this constant sort of back and forth, right? Do I do it or do I not do it? Do I allow myself to play, or do I be responsible and get a real job? Right? Whereas everything is play. Job is play. Hanging out with kids is play. Hanging out with your wife is play. Cooking is play. Everything is play. And if you allow yourself, because that dimple, right? That dimple tells me that you yearn for play. Play is your mode of expression. And so if it's so entrenched in you that it shows up on your face, why not go along with it? right? And that inner child, who wants your attention and wants to be raised right. And essentially, so this is, I tell this a lot during face readings, but when you were a child, your parents were your parents and they told you what to do. But they didn't have your morals, your values, your qualities, your understanding of the world. They were different people. So the stuff that they told you that was the right thing to do was really true for them, not for you, right? And then you grew up and you turned 20 at some point, and 20 is the more or less accepted adulthood mark, right? In some countries it's 18, sometimes it's 21, but like around that age. And so then you're 20 years old, and who's your parent now? Who's deciding whether you eat vegetables for dinner or not? It's Laurence, right? So you are the parent. And you have you have the masculine and the feminine inside you. You have your right side, which is the masculine side, the doing side, and you have your left side, which is the receiving side, the feminine, the softer, the feeling as opposed to doing, So those both are inside you, both parts of who you really are. So those are your parents. Laurence A and Laurence B are your parents of the little inner child. And the inner child chakra is about halfway through the heart chakra and the throat chakra. So like right here, there's a little heart protrusion. You can imagine that being your inner child. Sometimes tapping that if somebody's stressed out, just a little bit lower than your hollow. Yeah, right there. So sometimes when people are stressed out, it helps if you tap. It's an inner child thing. Anyway, so this is your inner child. That's where he lives. It's little Laurence. He's always 4. No matter how old you are, he's always 4. And your parents, no matter how old you are, they're still your parents. They're Laurence A and Laurence B. So they're all named Laurence, all 3 of them. Kind of confusing. But you know who they are because you know who you are. And so you are here, and your greatest responsibility from now till you die is to raise yourself right. So what are you going to do to make sure that the 4-year-old Laurence is raised in a way that you would have wanted to be raised when you were 4?
That's a good question. Because there's a lot of ways I'd approach it, I suppose. I mean, whether it's taking time to read or regular exercise or worrying about what I'm eating or yeah, taking time to just play music or taking time to study music, study history.
Yeah. All of that.
And yeah.
It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be a parent to a 4-year-old.
Well, I can imagine. I'm getting to experience my nephew Liam. He's like 9 months old, and probably the baby that I've gotten to know the most in my life, just by seeing him frequently. He's not 4 yet, but no. Under 4. You said under 4.
But as he's growing up, do listen to what he has to say, because they say that there's a really deep wisdom that children have before they become influenced by society, and that they remember their purpose, they remember who they really are, and they can tell you things. Like they might, sometimes little young children still remember their past lives, so they can tell you stories about who they used to be. And it's very interesting. I've had some interesting conversations with 4-year-olds. The biggest problem is that adults tend to dismiss children as uninteresting, or they can't add anything, whereas there's some deep wisdom. And you can see it in some YouTube videos. People film their little 3-year-olds. There's a little Oriental girl who says, I just want you guys to get along. And it's that the way she speaks is so eloquent, and she explains why it's important for mommy and daddy to get along, and she doesn't want to be mean, she just wants them to get along. That's an example of wisdom from a really young person.
I think I can remember that perspective with my parents at some point. I don't know how young or how old, probably at a pretty young age, trying to step in that way.
Yeah, I've done it too myself. So, But I also, through a past life regression, remembered, it was like a meditation. I remembered that as a young person, when I was like 3 years old, I thought it was my responsibility to make sure my parents behaved. Somehow, magically, I don't know how, I figured that it was me. And I felt at 3 years old that I was failing at making my parents get along. I'm not succeeding. And I don't know. I still haven't really unpacked that thought. But there was like a memory from when I was really young. Like, I can't believe I'm still not succeeding in making these two get along. So, do you have any other questions about your face? I think I've covered everything.
I think you have. No. Can't say that I have any questions about my face, but look forward to listening back to this, and I appreciate you having me on and having that providing the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions or if anything comes up, you know how to get a hold of me, and you can always ask me anything. And if your wife has any questions, I'll answer them too, because I know she was listening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop streaming now. Give me 1 second. Oh.